Okay, so now we're going to talk about the Gottlieb System1 era games. This was Gottlieb's first electronic solid-state system. They were pretty much the Cadillac of pinball in the electromechanical era, and then when they moved into solid state, it wasn't quite as graceful as they would have liked. Their electronics was developed by Rockwell, not internally by Gottlieb, and because of that it caused some problems which we're going to discuss in the repair of these System1 Gottlieb games from 1977 to about 1979. First, talk about getting into the game. Of course, I'm going to assume you have a key to the lock. The coin door opens up. There's a little lever here that opens. Lockdown bar comes off. Glass slides out. With the lockdown bar out, you can reach in and flip the ball to the shooter lane and get the ball out, and then lift the playfield up, and we can begin to talk about the power developing in the bottom of the cabinet. The power cord comes in, it hits an EMI filter, which basically is a noise filter. You've got two transformers which convert the line voltage to the voltages needed for the game. This big transformer does the coil voltage, 24 volts, and the 6 volts for the general illumination and for the CPU control lighting. The little transformer does the score display voltages, and also what it ultimately ends up as the 5 volts, but starts out as 12 volts. You've got a variety of fuses across here. We've got two bridge rectifiers, one for the coils, one for the lamps. I've installed LEDs on these just because we're going to talk about that, but I like LEDs. And then you've got a big large ground plane here and some diodes for the coin door switches. Now in the back box there's a key on this side which you can unlock, and then the door swings open, gaining you access to the score glass and the Futaba 6-digit score displays. And this panel opens up, revealing the computer logic boards. So there's only 3 boards inside these Gottlieb System1s. The small board here, which is the power supply. This is a replacement, by the way. This is not the original power supply. They make aftermarket. Oh, actually all these boards are available in aftermarket. Up here we've got the CPU board, which originally had a square Data Century style battery right here, which often leaks and causes battery corrosion. This board did in fact have battery corrosion at one time, but I bead blasted it and then replaced it with a coin style CR 2032 lithium battery. And then the last board is down here. This is the driver board, which drives all the lamps and coils, the CPU control lamps and coils on the playfield, like the drop target resets and kick out holes, etc., etc. So one of the big issues with this game is, again, we talked about the battery here on the CPU board. It leaks and it loves to wreck these connectors. These are just edge style connectors and they pull off. A lot of times the pins get really corroded in here and they all have to be replaced. It's fairly common on this game. One common trick is just to kind of take off this connector, which is right below the CPU board's battery, and then knock it on the wood and see if you get any broken pin parts down on the wood. That'll tell you right away if your connectors have major issues, which on these games they often do. And that is really the Achilles heel on this system, is all these card edge connectors. They do wear out and they don't last well with time. They don't age very well and they need a lot of replacement. The other thing that's a major problem in this game is grounds. Gottlieb has a metal ground plane on the back, but all the boards are off the ground plane with nylon feet, so that the ground on the board doesn't actually talk to the ground on this metal plane. Because of that, we have to do redundant grounds on each one of the boards. There's a wire over here going from the ground on the driver board to this metal plate. There's a wire here on the CPU board, again going from the ground on the CPU board to the metal plate. And then on the power supply, usually there's a wire going from the ground on the CPU board to the metal plate too, but this is a replacement rotten dog and we don't have to do that. The ground has already been incorporated into the bolting system so that the ground on the power supply actually does touch the plate without any added wires. Last thing I'd like to mention is Gottlieb in the back box didn't really use any LEDs on any of their boards. I, on the other hand, like to add LEDs for kind of like a visual assurance that things are working. Here, I'll turn the game on, I'll show you. So I've added some LEDs here. I've got an LED on the power supply board. This tells me that I've got 60 volts going to the score displays. I've got a minus 12 volt LED and a plus 5 volt LED for the CPU board, because the CPU board needs both minus 12 volts and plus 5 volts, which is generated, of course, by the power supply. Then I always add an LED on the driver board too, and that tells me that 5 volts is getting to the driver board. Just because I can, I add some LEDs on the bottom panel too. For example, this is an LED telling me that the coil power is working across the coil bridge rectifier. If I pull the coil fuse out, you can see that the LED goes out. So it'll immediately tell me if I've blown a coil fuse on the game. Likewise, this LED is for the lamps and the CPU controlled lamps, and again, if I pull this fuse out, this fuse right here, it'll tell me that all the CPU controlled lamps have gone out. So they're good indicators of fuse status. On the early Gottlieb System 1 games, they still used a chime box for their sound. Then they went to a first generation beep and bonk type sound card, and then finally ended up at like a second generation sound card that actually could play somewhat style of music. But this gives you the traditional rings of a chime machine, like an electromechanical game, for instance. So that's our overview of Gottlieb's first generation solid state electronic game known as the Gottlieb System 1, made from 1977 to 1979.